Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to the morning session. Today we have with us Dr. V.R. Madhu. Sir is Principal Scientist Fishing Technology, ICR Central Institute of Fisheries Technology, Kochi, Kerala. And the topic chosen by our esteemed guest is importance of fish behavior studies for fishing gear design. Sir, you're audible as well as visible, and your screen is also visible. And we have started recording the screen. You may start by presenting your screen, changing to PowerPoint basically. Slideshow, yes. Perfect. So we can start.
Yeah, thank you. So today we will be dealing with how, in fact, behavior can be used as an input for designing fishing gears. I hope I'm audible.
Said you're audible.
Yeah, thank you. So to begin with, we would say that there has been a shift in the philosophy of fishing, and there was a myth, that stocks were unlimited, and then how much we catch from the sea or from any resources. It seemed like it was inexhaustible, but then that myth was shattered due to the decline in the catches, or also the plateauing of the catches, what we have seen from the last 20 years or so. And also we have seen, in addition to the decrease in catches, or if the catches have been plateauing, we also have seen the mean trophic levels of the species decreasing over time. This has got implications, like we will discuss about that also. And then mid-90s also showed heightened interest in sustainability of resources. And also a lot of FAO and ICS meetings, which highlighted the issue of non-sustainability in fisheries. And then responsible fishing came into the lexicon in 2001 with the Reykjavik conference. That was in fact the baseline. Like I was mentioning, the status of the world fisheries, like the latest Sophia figures that we have, we see that over here, maybe like from 90s, the capture, particularly the capture fisheries, has been stagnating. And in contrast to that, we see that the capture from the aquaculture sector has been increasing. So partially, or it is mostly due to the increase in the capture, the culture fisheries, that the world has sustained the the level of fish availability. And then coming to the case of India, particularly in the marine sector, we see that the stock estimate of 52 stocks have been carried out by CMFRA, and then it's like almost 60%, 55.77% are found to be biologically sustainable. There was a recent paper which appeared in ICS Journal of Marine Sciences, which showed that many of our stocks, in fact, are declining or in a very precarious state of sustainability. And I was mentioning about the decline in the mean trophic levels. We see that this is a famous study by Polly et al., which has appeared in the Nature magazine. We see that over these years, we find that the capture of species which are higher in trophic level, the tunas, the sharks, and all others, have been coming down. And we mostly fish the lower trophic level species nowadays. And that's the world, that's the entire situation what's happening. And specifically, we had a paper from Butler and Polly in 2008, which showed that the mean trophic level in Indian waters is also decreasing concurrently. And then issues like we have a lot of bycatch being generated by different trawling systems, and trawls which contribute around 50% or more than 50% of the catches, generate a large number or large quantities of juveniles of bycatch, which is mostly juveniles, in fact. So these are some of the visuals from the trawling, where we find that most of these catches are comprised of juveniles. And again, a paper from CMFRA which shows that the LBB is low value bycatch, that has been increasing. Like it was 14% in 2008, and then in 2011, it's almost one fourth of like what we produce is low value bycatch. So this is a situation level, in fact. There's a lot of factors, in fact, which contribute to it. And one of them is use of non-sustainable gears. And like I was mentioning, the responsible fishing gears, that is one. Then we have the responsible technologies available. Then, as I was mentioned, the bycatch there's a serious issue in the world fisheries. There are a lot of studies, in fact, starting from SILA to the latest FAO estimates that we have from RODA, which shows that almost 10% of the capture, of the capture fisheries is constituted by bycatch or discards. And I've just listed out, different type of gears here, and then their respective scores, like as with regard to the ecosystem effect index, we see that the gears which score higher are better off. In fact, spears, traps, boats, long lining, hand lining, they are much better off when compared to the demersal trawls and beam trawls, which have a low value of this. So just to mention, like the different types of gears and how they affect our ecosystem. And then in concurrent to like what I said earlier regarding it was in 90s that there was a stress on sustainability. Till the early 90s, there was a stress on increasing efficiency. In fact, if we consider the studies by CFT itself, we see that most of studies, in fact, from CFT which has come out, had or had focused more on increasing the efficiency of gears. Like we had different, seams of trawls, different colored gill nets, a lot many. But then the overall, the goal was, in fact, to increase the efficiency of these gears. And then the post 90s, so a large number of studies with regard to selectivity, improving the selectivity of gears, responsible fishing gears development, then energy conservation, then reduction in bycatch and discards. So the entire, as I mentioned earlier, it's regarding the selectivity, responsible gears, energy conservation. All these, in fact, move towards, there was a move towards technical measures. In fact, these are called technical measures in fisheries, closed areas, closed seasons, responsible gears, everything. So, and when we talk about these developing responsible gears, that which is the topic of our talk, we see that whenever we develop a responsible fishing gear, or whenever we try to improve the selectivity, it was mostly a trial and error method. In fact, what we do is we design a gear, use it out at sea, on the field, and then try to find out the results. And this basically is a very costly effort in fact. So say, for example, if it's a trawl design, we need to at least conduct 30 or 40 trials out at sea, which is in fact very, very costly. And then, so what could be the alternative? And then as I was mentioning, like most of these studies are basically blindly dependent on the catch composition of the net, and which in fact, depends on the time of the day where the experiments are being conducted, the sea condition, and a lot of many factors. In fact, we cannot really figure out like what exactly is causing this gear to be responsible or otherwise. So that was blind, in fact. So alternatives, what are the alternatives? In fact, this is, you do these experiments in situ, you have a small tank, and then do the experiments and then find out like how this gear or particular intervention is affecting the overall capture process. But then, yeah, we will be talking about it later. So this is basically comes to behavior of fish, particularly. And when we talk about the fish behavior, in fact, on a broader sense, it could be defined as an adaptation of fish to external and internal environments, and also to the natural and artificial stimuli. In fact, anywhere, it could be in the field or in the tanks, like we conduct our study. This is the basic definition of fish behavior. It is just adaptation of fish, how fish adapts to both internal and external environments, and also to the natural and artificial stimuli. And in context, in fact, there are two very important distinctions which to be made. In fact, most of the studies like what we have now on fish behavior is solely towards the ecology part of it. In fact, many of these studies from ICES and all mostly related to the ecology of fish and then how it behaves. And then the fish behavior in the context of fish capture, studies related to this is very, very limited in our waters. And when we talk about fish behavior in the context of fish capture, it is the reaction of fish to different physical and chemical stimuli associated with the gear, and also the reaction it makes, particularly the movement and distribution of the gear. there are a lot of factors that affect the behavior of fish, and one of these is the swimming speed, because we see that much of the gear that we uh, uh, use in India or anywhere in the world is active gears. So basically, two classifications: active and passive gears. Active gears are those gears which actively chase fish, like the trawl lines and all. And then passive are the gill nets and long lines, where we attract fish to that particular gear and capture is made. So this has got implications in sense that the active gears are highly energy intensive when compared to the passive gears. But then the overall catch, if you see, it would be much higher in case of active gears. And of course, there is a concurrent energy increase also in the capture. I was mentioning about the energy consumption, because let's say for case of trawls, uh, an average trawler would consume around say 15 to 20 liters per the average trawl. There are much more also per hour of operation. And then if you don't get a particular the concurrent amount of fish, then it's going to be a huge loss. That's what's really happening in the Indian scenario. And measurements mostly how the fish behaves to this swimming. That is called an optomotor response. Like the fish sees this gear and then it moves along with it. So then there is in fact both involved. In fact, there is a speed and then there's a vision involved. There's the olfaction and everything, and then also the how long the fish can swim in that direction. And mostly these are done in situ experiments by determining the oxygen depletion in water. And the highest energy consumption is around 4 kilowatts per kilogram. That was the measured energy consumption in fish. So this 4 kilowatt is something like 3.2 calories per hour. And also, if you see the swimming speed is related to the its size, temperature, and condition of fish. Temperature is again a very important factor. And there's something called a U optimum. This is the energy spent per minute. Is the least at the optimum speed. So then this is like basically a benchmark, the cost of transport of fish, because fish, in fact, any behavior, any organism tries to optimize its energy use. So that is a very important concept in designing a gear. So this is something it looks like. So the swimming speed increases and then metabolic rate concurrently increases. So there is an optimum, if it is the swimming speed is less and metabolic rate is much higher, then gradually, like if this would be the graph. So the U opt is somewhere here, in fact. So fish, in fact, in active fishing systems, always tries to maintain this speed so that the metabolic rate is the optimum. And this is like the trawl. So this is the water boats and then the bridles. And this is quite a complex system, in fact, underwater, where you have, as I already mentioned, like there are a lot of factors that goes in. You have the optomotor responses. The fish shoal, if it is inside, it sees the water board and then the bridles. Then there is a swim along going on. So the fish swims along with the trawls. And then finally, and then that speed, in fact, would be something very close to the EU opt. And then finally, after a period of time, it cannot maintain its speed. Then its resources gets exhausted. Then finally, it goes inside and gets trapped in the quadrant, which is the last portion of the net. So that, in fact, this speed of the trawl net underwater, also has a lot of implications with regard to the quality of fish also. And there are a lot of, some studies which been carried out in the European waters, where they have tried to correlate the quantity of the quality of the fish and the speed and the type, like how it is being caught for how long, and also there's always an optimization going on with regard to fish and also with regard to the fisherman, because for him, like if the energy saving is a great or the most important factor. So there's everywhere, you find an optimization going on with regard to speed, with regard to the speed of fish itself, which it maintains for its U-opt. So it's quite a complex, set of conditions which we we normally don't see, but what is happening underwater. So taking out these complicated factors into consideration, it's very difficult to you know to simulate all these conditions underwater. But then some of these, like the speed of the fish and the speed of water, some of these can be maintained at least, or can be regulated and find out like how this fish behaves underwater. So we have such facility, a small facility where this is a ramp. I mean, this is a running ramp, and we have a small net-like structure which can be fixed on this. And this moves at a particular speed where it can be varied using this device. So we see that how fish responds to different speeds and all. So this could help, in fact, to optimize the size of the gear and also the speed at which the trawling can be done. Then something related, so I'm just mentioning some of these terms, in fact, like burst and post swimming. And then this is 2 lengths per second. So that is, in fact, the speed, how it's mentioned in case of swimming fish. So this is 2 lengths per second. So 2 lengths of fish per second. And that is, in most of the cases, that's found to be a yacht in fish. And then there is some burst and post swimming. Burst swimming is highly energy intensive. It sounds like it may go to 6 or 7 lengths per second, but it has got a high demand for energy, and then the fish normally gets exhausted and swims slow. But then post swimming is something that the fish can maintain the speed for longer periods of time. And I think most of you have also read that schooling, in fact, has energy benefits for fish. And then this is like for a fish of 10 to 50 centimeters average, the speed could be like 0.9 or either 1 lengths per second to almost 10 lengths per second. This has implications. Why I'm mentioning this is like this has implications when we try to design a gear, particularly the active gears. And then the burst speed I was mentioning has depends on size of fish, and also the maximum values is like 10, but it may go up to 20 lengths per second in case of burst swimming. And I was mentioning the temperature has got a big effect. So with every 10-degree rise in temperature, the speed doubles. So that was, in fact, some of these fact in terms and basic data regarding like how the swimming speed, and then what is swimming speed and how it benefits the gear design process. And then all of us, the second most important is the vision of fish itself, and then its role. I think it has got a very important, this is a very important component in regard to the capture of fish, and then how the fish interacts with the gear underwater. And then we see that there's a large diversity of the fishes, and similarly there's a much larger variety of the type of eye, particularly the structure of eye happening in the commercially important gears. And much of these studies are very nascent stage, and it's not very exhaustively done in most of these cases. And then also we see that most of these are RGB sensitive, but then some of these fishes have UV sensitive cones also, and even infrared also. So that's the fourth dimension. And then just skip this one. Yeah. So we have done some studies on with regard to fish retina. So this is the absorption spectra for Atropus suratensis, which is a fish which lives in the freshwater estuarine areas. And then we see that much of these absorption takes place at this 420 nanometers. And also we have done a study with regard to different colored gillnets, which is interesting. And also with regard to the moving image, and most of we have observed in case of lines. So when we try to move the line, so that's when the fish gets attracted more, rather than keeping it static. So this is like very important here, because that's depend on the visual acuity of the fish. There's a flucker fusion happening in which the frequency of the images fuse to produce the complete image. And so And also this, in fact, is light dependent. Temperature also depends a lot on this, and also the duration of the flash, like how long the flash is, and then how fast it moves. And it's been found that fish can detect motion at a wide range of intensities of light, maybe from 10 to 14 lux, and it's like, and as the light intensity increases, the sensitivity also gets increased. I was mentioning about the optomotor response, like it's a lot of much importance with regard to the active gears. And then so this is like the visual contrast I was mentioning about. So rather than the brightness, is the contrast of the gear that is very important for the fish. So the white, if it is a white one, they're looking up. Fish looking up, like it won't see this. And similarly, a black gear, and then a fish looking down. And if the gear is dark, in fact, it's very difficult to find out this. So the designing process, particularly with regard to the static gears, the gillnets and all, this is very important. Just because based on the spatio-temporal distribution, or either the vertical distribution of the fish, we could also make this gears, design gears, such that the maximum efficiency or maximum evasion, like whatever. Like the intent is to release of juveniles, then we have to design accordingly. So the final design process, which I will mention on later stage, is basically what we try uh, to to do. Basically, if it is want to, if our intention is basically to release juveniles, then we have to design the gear accordingly. Or otherwise, the design process is different. So I was mentioning the gillnet study which we have done with regard to Atroplus. So we have compared the green, then transparent, and blue. So what we find is that the green, this was done in the riverine conditions and somewhat estuary, uh, in some saline waters to an extent of around 12 ppt or so. Then we see that the green uh, nets had the highest catch when compared to the other blue and transparent. Then blue and transparent, of course, didn't have any significant difference. So, in fact, it's related to like what we, so most of the cases, like we we get an idea, or like we try to infer that the transparent gears, the transparent color would catch more, but that's not the case that's happening. In fact, the green had caught almost double the catch of the transparent. So it's quite the complex. It could be the color of water, the movement of water, but then this is the result like what we got in case of Heteroplus. And also, this is species dependent, because another species with a different habitat would have a different results. And then in case of hearing, not much of studies basically on hearing in case of fishes, because it's the lack of experimental setups, or rather the designing of experiments to such studies. That could be the reason why, like, we have very rare studies on the listening capabilities of fish. And then, but traditionally, many of these process of hearing in fish has been used. This is a method traditionally used in the Japanese, like where they use the sound of this to capture fish. And then in case of set nets, uh, this is basically for the yellowtail Seriola concurrentata in Japanese waters. Then also, it has been found that sound could be an important factor in fad-based fishing, in which the underwater sound generated by materials could act as an sensory cue for fishes. Like regularly, if there's something happening, then there's a chance that fishes could come to that fad. And then this method called Payu in Philippine waters, where the study on the hearing has been carried out. And also, increasingly, we've been using sound as a deterrent in seawater intake installations. Like the installation are kept free by using sound, and then the there's an increasing incidence of dolphins in the gears, particularly the gillnets and the perseals, where the dolphins basically eat away the catch that has been caught by the fishermen. So pingers, which produce sound, which harass away the cetaceans, like have been tried particularly around the Kerala waters. And then sharks, they show a difference to around 500 hertz. And then we have issues like the effect of the hull also producing sound, and then it's been found that they move away fishes. And also the one of the problems with regard to the sound is that it gets habituated, particularly in case of the dolphins. We continuously need to change the pinger frequency because the dolphins get habituated to that sound, and then they no more respond to it. So that is also an issue. And I think much of these, the last probably is the olfaction, and which is very important in sense because one of the most widely used gears, the long line, uses this, and also traps. And in the largest thing, this is basically some of the snapshots like which could be used for designing gears. So largest swimming fishes have high profitability. This is basically the probability of encounter because larger fish and fast swimming fish would have covered more areas, and then this is basically locating plumes. And using dispersion models, it is understood that fish responds to the bait order, the plume order, from almost 10 meters to several kilometers, depending on, of course, the state of the fish also, like the state of where it is hungry, then what is the attract and release from the bait, and the current velocity. So in addition to the fish behavior, we need to also take into account the direction, the condition of the weather, and then the currents and all those for deploying a gear which uses olfaction as a cue. Axis. In case of like some of the studies are there, particularly also in an Indian scenario where we have developed artificial baits also from fish waste, and then it's found to be effective, at least in the in situ studies. And also, it could be used for the exclusion of non-target species also, like see in case of Hawaiian longline fishery, which is one of the biggest. In fact, it has been found that if students use as a bait, this considerably reduces the sharp catches. And then sea turtles, which in fact come as a bycatch in long lines, can be reduced if mackerels have been used as baits. So these are some of these studies which show that olfaction could be used as in other way also, rather than increasing the efficiency. Could sharks are in fact many of these shark species are in the list, IUSN list, and then are not to be captured. So such situations, like we could use specific baits to ward them off. And one of these study, like we have tried with regard to the use of baits. Also, like in addition to the bait, in fact, the mouth of the trap is also an important factor which decides the capture of fish. So it's not just the bait. Bait could be quite good, producing a lot of plumes. But it's not only that. There are a lot of other factors also which comes into play when we design a gear. And one of the studies, like what our colleagues have done in the backwaters of Kerala, what he has done is like he tried to bait the gillnets with different mackerel and sardine meat. It has been found that there was not much significant increase in catches, but then the carnivores have increased. Carnivore species have increased in the catches. There is one way to use the baits or olfaction to improve catches. And then finally coming to the fishing gear design part. I think I've already told fishing is a very complex process, particularly the active fishing gears. There are a multitude of factors which are involved, starting from the vision to olfaction to the current, the sea state, the water, with the temperature, all those things. So many of these stimuli act in tandem for the capture of fish. And then it might not be always uh, possible to single out one condition that affects the fishing gear, the capture of the fishing gear, or the efficiency of the gear. So the ideal option would be the in situ studies. But issues related to applicability in the field conditions are there. In fact, say, in case of trawls, there are a lot of factors which go into it, but we may not be able to study all those factors. But then maybe the speed of the water, which affects the capture. So that is one. And then, but then the sum of all these can lead to significant insights. So that's like where we have been trying. But then the static gears like traps are much easier because much of these factors which govern the catchability of that gear can be singled out when compared to the other gears like long lines and then trawls and then persines and all. So static gear has got advantage here in case of the in situ studies. But whatever, like if you see the outcome, whatever it is, however small it is, like it is very important and very useful for designing a gear. Yeah, and yeah, there's of course a fit trade-off, maximizing our catches. For the fishermen, basically it's maximizing the catch, and for the policymaker and for the public in general, it's resource conservation. So there's always a trade-off that's happening in case of the fish, in case of the fishermen, and in case of the population factor. So there is always some trade-off, some optimization has to happen. And then coming to the principal mechanism of fish capture, like how it's happening. The first in case is like filtering, where we have the trawls, seams, etc., where the water is being filtered out, and whatever comes in these in the water gets trapped inside. So that's the filtering mechanism, which happens in case of trawls and seams. Then tangling happens in the gillnets and the trammelers. There's a physical obstruction to the fish. So we have a lot of snagging and then gilling, a lot of things like case of gillnets. And then trammeler is basically it's not very very selective a gear where we see a lot of entrapment happening, and also capture of a lot of juveniles. Then hooking, uh, which includes the hook and also a bait, and then the fish gets hooked. So this is the process involved in the handline and longline operations. In case of trapping, we have the ports and traps, again, which involves a bait, olfaction. For example, it is in case of traps and ports, and pumping not much used, but of course, it's there, particularly when the catches are quite high in case of persines. And then the attraction, like it's in concurrent with the hooks and ports. Like we have the attraction part and repulsion avoidance, herding and guiding. And these are the behavioral controls, which could be used. So in association with other uh, conditions, like so this is in general like what we do in case of a gear design. First, we try to analyze the conditions, and then the need statement is there, like what is the type of fish we need to capture and what is the maximum allowable limits, because we have a lot of gear related restrictions happening, the size of the gear, the mesh size and everything. So, and then the design idea generation part. So we design like I've been mentioning all those factors that have gone in, and also uh, like how fish behaves to that. So this is the process where a lot of ideas come in from different studies, and then the evaluation part, and then like there are studies like which derive selection parameters for different gears for a particular mesh size, and then particular fishing conditions. Like say, for example, we have seen for green and transparent, there is a difference in selectivity. So all these factors come into account here, the evaluation stage, and then the design development. So we have a design drawing with all the intricate uh, the inputs like what they go in, the mesh size, the mesh twine size, and then the floats to be used, the size of the floats to be used, the sinkers to be used, the weight to be used, and everything come in this stage. And then the prototype is developed, where prototype, once it is developed, it could be tried in a flume tank. But in Indian scenario, we don't have this condition here, and also it's much costly also. So what we go in for is the field trials here, and after this, again it goes to an evaluation stage. What has happened, the shortcomings and the benefits, everything. So it could be the after the prototype development, either in the flume tank or the field trials, it goes to the next stage of evaluation. So if something is not right, then it again goes to this stage of the design idea generation, where one of these factors, in fact, we try to change. And then this entire cycle goes on. And then it is only after when we get satisfied with a particular design, then it goes to the final stage and to the industry. So this is in fact the actual mechanism of the gear design process and game design development process. Much of this is really happening in the European waters, but then in our conditions, like where we have serious issues of implementation. In fact, much of this doesn't really happen, and much of our gear developers are the net makers in the marine industry, where the inputs, like whatever scientific inputs that have been coming in from different scattered studies, are not, if you go, for example, if you go to a fishing harbor, a marine fishing harbor, you find a lot of nets. Like they say it is for a cephalopod trawl, it's for fish trawl, it's a sole trawl. But then if you really see like the people making it or the design process, there is nothing. It's a trial and error method. And what they say is like they increase the weight of the net. So on it, I mean, thinking that it would fish in the deeper waters, but then that might not be the case, because fuel efficiency is one of these factors that needs to be considered. But then all these factors normally don't happen in the field, at least in our waters. And I was mentioning the design drawing stage. And so it is here. I mean, this is just the basic structure of a gear. So the design process itself, like we try to understand the type of fish that we need to capture, and also the condition of the vessel, what is the engine power, then what is the cord and mesh size to be used based on the regulations of that particular state. So all this comes in this design idea generation evaluation stage. And then, as I mentioned, if something is not correct, then it again goes back to this stage, and where we try to change these parts, and then again go for the field trials or the flume tank trials. And some of these factors that need to be factored in, the mesh size I was mentioning, because this has got very important implications with regard to the fuel consumption, because the lower the mesh size, the more is the drag, or either the thicker the twine, again there is a drag involved, and then all this translates to higher fuel consumption, and then finally to the economics. Basically, fishing operation is it's a commercial activity, and then so the idea is to either increase capture or to reduce the fuel consumption. So that's the intention. And then the mesh diameter, the taper ratio, like how taper is like how fast it goes down. So the lesser the taper, then the more the drag. The accessories used, size specifications of the different accessories used in different gears, and also weight of webbing, amount of webbing that goes into a net. All these are factors that affect the design process, and in fact, finally the fish capture process also. This is a small, flume tank which we have seen in SeaTech. So you can see here a gear being operated with a constant flow of water, so it maintains. So what is done in a flume tank, or in a scaled down version of what is done in a flume tank is a scaled down version of the sea conditions itself. Like we develop a smaller gear, and the principle of similarity is used here to assess the dimensions and specifications of the full scale version. So if a normally it is like 1:10 or 1:20 or 1:130, 1:100 sizes. So based on the facility available in the flume tank, we try to minimize it, and also scaling up, like how the gear behaves actually in the field conditions. Then further evaluation. So there is the primary evaluation that's happening in the flume tanks, and then the further evaluation is done by full-scale versions in actual sea conditions or in the whatever water bodies they have been used. And also there is this increasing use of underwater cameras, since many of these underwater cameras like the GoPros have become quite cheaper, and that also helps to it also helps in identifying the weaker or in the areas where we can make improvements. And then there are sensors also attached to the different parts of the gears, particularly the active fishing gears, to understand how it behaves underwater. And we have vessels out at CFT, and then this is one of the field trials that we happening out at sea. So this is a new trawl net that was designed, and here you can find the sensors, the yellow ones. One more here. So this gives the entire three-dimensional shape of the net underwater. So based on that, we can in fact improve the gear. So also, in fact, one of these issues in the fishing operations is the generation of large amount of bycatch, as I was mentioning in one of my earlier slides. So again, the fish reactions to BRD, that is also a very important factor, and then a lot of intrinsic and extrinsic factors that go into the designing of BRDs, like the physiological state of the motivation state, fish size, visual ability, all this, because these BRDs are basically devices that are included in the gear, in addition to like what we have to reduce the bycatch to avoid unwanted species to be caught. And also the conditions, design and position, the light and temperature, all these things affect the reaction of fish to the BRDs. And some of these, snapshots like from different studies, in case of a flow rate, it seems like something around 0.4 in that area. So the slower the water flow in that region where the BRD is installed, the better is the escapement. That's what they found. And upward excluding grids. Grids in sense are the physical barriers. So something like the turtle excluder device, which physically stops the turtle from entering the cordon, and it basically goes up. Turtles, if they're encountered, it goes up. So we have found that the upward excluding grids are found to be better. And also light is coming, is also a very important factor nowadays. And there's a recent paper that in gill nets, particularly the use of lights, they significantly improve the selection properties and also they reduce the bycatch to a considerable extent. And some of our old studies have shown that the Hilsa gill nets, orange colored nets, were found to be good. These have been used in Gujarat waters. Even now you can see the Narmada estuary and all. And to sum up, the study of fish behavior mostly is concentrated in the domain of ecology. Many of the traditional colleges or institutions work on this, but mostly on the domain of ecology. And then studies pertaining to the behavior in fish capture is very limited. It's because that the conditions in which the fishing gear and the fish is exposed to is too complex to single out one event or one factor that affects the behavior of fish. So that is like, so that's the reason why the studies pertaining to the behavior of fish is very limited. And also the inherent difficulties in assessing the behavior of fish, because there are a lot number of fishes, and then particularly if let's say multi-species fishery, then it becomes quite complex. And most of the studies, like or whatever studies we have in the institute, are mostly in the institute observations, and then field studies are very, very rare. But nevertheless, this is one of the a very important input for developing responsible gears. Whatever inputs that come from institute studies also could be a major contributing factor to develop responsible fishing gears. And also this developing this field, we require more people and technology. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, if there are any questions or interactions, we have few minutes. We can do those. Let me allow the microphone usage of microphone for the participants, and they can now ask questions. Participants, you can ask questions directly on microphone or send them via chat.
Can I stop presenting, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
If there are any questions, interactions, any queries, you can divert them right now to sir via chat or directly on microphone. Please ask questions if you have any.
There are no questions.
I don't think there are any questions. If there are, please ask. Sir, if there are no questions, we can consider the session to be over. And on behalf of the organizing committee and on behalf of the participants, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to you, sir. We had such a lovely presentation from you. Thanks a lot for being with us, and we look forward to future interactions with you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. There are 3 sessions today. The second one is at 2:30 and the third one is at 3:30. Please join accordingly. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.